Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We had a couple of technical difficulties, and we also are Susie's dealing with a situation where she's looking after someone. So she's going to be off camera for a little while, at least for the first hour. And I just published my article on our previous findings from the last few streams. I only got up to partway through stream the Decipher episode 11 and 12. So I hope that you all like it, and I'm going to actually run through a few of the points that I made in that article. It may have a couple of edits, like if I spot a typo or something, my apologies, and I will update it as I can in the next few hours after the stream. But I was just really excited to share this article with you all, and I wanted to publish it before we stream. So it's just a few minutes old, and we're going to take a look. I'm going to share a screen in a moment and just read through with you. And thank you again for joining us. We know it's been a bit of a rocky, holiday season, but life happens. All right. Okay, so the title of the article is Snowden Files Provide New Insight on the NSA and the Power it Wields. And before I continue, I'd like to say that if you go to Twitter and type in @Elizabeth Lee, Lea Voss, VOS, you'll see my profile. Just follow me if you want, but basically the article is there. And also it's also at the Twitter profile, the handle @Disobedient News. So if you're trying to find the article, you can also just Google Disobedient Media and it should be the first article on the site. So in the first little paragraph, I'm just explaining that, that Susie and I worked together on this Decipher project, and that, together we've analyzed over 100 documents from batch 4. And then obviously Susie's analyzed hundreds and hundreds of documents before that. So that I'm explaining that this is a continuation specifically on batch 4, and that it's not finished, but that I'm presenting some of the findings that we have so far. And I just dove right into it, and I started speaking about the NSA's definition of denial and deception. This is one of the chronologically earliest findings that we looked at that was significant. And it was just the fact that they actually give their definition of these terms, because we couldn't really find this anywhere else. And because it was also interesting to us because denial is labeled secret while deception is labeled unclassified. And then we went on to talk about the Office of Target Pursuit. And again, this is an early finding, but it's important because it's difficult to find definitions of these terms. And they're also sometimes new terms. I remember that as I was listening to the stream, it was really helpful that somebody actually provided us the PDF that talked about what this exactly means. And the PDF happened to be from the PDF happened to be from the WikiLeaks document. Okay. So basically, I stated that the Snowden file read in part, after completing a 6-month tour, interns chose 2 additional tours from S2 target offices, the Target Analysis Center, Cryptologic and Exploitation Services, SIG development elements, including the Office of Target Pursuit and the Network Analysis Center. With the help of a viewer, we were able to find definitions in regards to the initial WikiLeaks file that explained these definitions. And then I just have.
I'm just going to get Crash. Hey, I am actually here. I'm just going to hang out and talk to you guys in chat and send a few more tweets than normal. As Elizabeth explained, I'm actually looking after someone who's sick at the moment. I'm sorry. So that's why I'm not on video at the moment, but I am here. So if you want to talk to me or ask me questions, you're welcome to. I'm dying to see Elizabeth's new article. I knew that she was writing something, but I actually haven't got to read it yet. Because it's only just come out a couple of minutes ago. But Elizabeth, will you please read us the article?
Okay, I get embarrassed and whatnot, but
it's a bedtime story.
Sure, I'll try. I'll start from the top.
Yeah, but nice and slow as well, because both you and I have funny accents, like for the Americans to listen
Yeah,
to.
no, I totally understand. And plus, yeah, when I'm writing, I'm always trying to skip ahead a few moments to catch if I have a typo or if I've misworded something. So that's another reason that I
Sure.
rush. But I
Yeah,
will.
Cockatoo, actually, the Cockatoo is an awesome proofreader. I'm not sure if he's here tonight, but hopefully.
Well, in future, I will, on Snowden documents, I may actually take advantage of that because proofreading is always helpful. So I'll just start from the beginning. And I've already spoken about the title a little bit. It was, like I said, it was really difficult to choose a title for an article this broad that talks about so many different individual topics. Okay, so starting from the beginning. New Zealand Internet Party leader Susie Dawson and this author have continued to analyze Snowden files that have so far never received public scrutiny. Disobedient Media previously reported on findings stemming from Batch 3 of the Intercept's Snowden file archives. Dawson and this author have analyzed over 100 documents from the Intercept's Batch 4 of the Snowden files to date, and have noted numerous items of key significance revealed in the never-before publicized data. The collaboration under the title Decipher EU will continue until sometime in early 2018. A selected group of our findings is presented here, with the rest of Batch 4 findings to be discussed at a later date. One of the first documents in Batch 4 discussed the NSA's definition of denial and deception. The document advertises a seminar which would be presented by Dr. Larry Gershwin, the National Intelligence Officer for Intelligence Assurance and Chairman of the Foreign Denial and Deception Committee, FDDC. The description of Gershwin's presentation reads in part, secret, denial, methods and means of protecting state and military secrets and of preventing or impairing U.S. intelligence collection and analysis that targets those secrets. And then deception, which was unclassified. Measures designed to mislead by manipulation, distortion, or falsification of evidence to induce the US to react in a manner prejudicial to its interests. And the other, and I'm adding a side note here, one of the reasons that I didn't get to write down here, one of the reasons that this was significant as Susie and I were reading through documents is because we assume that although these definitions are describing basically defensive, like what other states or entities are doing to the US, we assume that they are also applying these methods aggressively to other states and entities. So it was useful in understanding how the NSA operates. Dawson noted that while the definition of denial was marked secret, the description of deception was marked unclassified. And then we're moving on to another finding that deals with definitions. Another finding of interest from episode 10 of Decipher EU was in regards to the definition of the Office of Target Pursuit. The Snowden file that we looked at read in part, after completing a 6-month tour in a TOPI, and I'll have to ask Susie later what that means actually, because I have no idea. Interns chose 2 additional tours from the S2 target offices.
The target office of primary interest.
Okay, that makes sense. I now remember you talking about that. The abbreviations kill me in these documents. So the Target Analysis Center, Cryptologic and Exploitation Services, SIGDEV elements, including the Office of Target Pursuit, there that is, there's that, and the Network Analysis Center. With the help of a viewer, and I spoke about this before, we were able to find definitions of these terms in a file from a WikiLeaks PDF document. And then I provide a screenshot of that file, which describes PRISM as an heir in one sense to a history of intelligence alliances within as many as 100 trusted US companies since the 1970s. The NSA calls these special source operations, and PRISM falls under that rubric. And so and this kind of historical background was new for me, and so I thought it was really useful, and that's why I included it. The document states that special source operations oversee, and I should have written oversee, not overseas, oversees PRISM, the PRISM program, one of the most infamous examples of mass surveillance revealed by the publication of the Snowden files. The Washington Post and other outlets have reported extensively on PRISM. And it is, side note, it is absolutely the biggest, most well-documented takeaway soundbite from the Snowden files. And part of the reason that Susie and I are covering these unreported documents is to show and explore the fact that there are other issues and other important information in addition to the PRISM program and mass surveillance in these files that should be looked at. So returning to the text. The Verge describes the program. PRISM is a tool used by the US National Security Agency to collect private electronic data belonging to users of major internet services like Gmail, Facebook, Outlook, and others. It's the latest evolution of the US government's post-9/11 electronic surveillance efforts, which began under President Bush with the Patriot Act and expanded to include Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, FISA, enacted in 2007 and 2006 and 2007. I wrote, while PRISM is a relatively recent development, special source operations are decades older. And then I provide another screenshot from the WikiLeaks document describing PRISM in relation to special source operations. And if you're reading the article along with me, you can actually click on those images and it'll take you in a new page to the original WikiLeaks PDF. And the little screenshot reads, like market researchers, but with far more privileged access, collection managers in the NSA's Special Source Operations Group, which oversees the PRISM program, are drawn to the wealth of information about their subjects in online accounts. For much the same reason, civil libertarians and some ordinary users may be troubled by the menu available to analysts who hold the required clearances to task the PRISM system. There has been continued exponential growth in tasking to Facebook and Skype, according to the PRISM slides. With a few clicks and an affirmation that the subject is believed to be engaged in terrorism, espionage, or nuclear proliferation, an analyst obtains full access to Facebook's extensive search and surveillance capabilities against the variety of online social networking services. And then I move on to another document which revealed that the US does indeed intervene militarily in order to secure the flow of oil to the US and its allies. And I know that this is a bit of a jump from the whole PRISM and special source operations topic, but this is just a very wide-ranging, it's a collection of our findings. And so that's just how that goes. The admission was made in a file relating to a seminar called African Petropolitics. The document reads that in part that by 2015, the United States will depend on West African oil for 25% of its oil imports. Oil production in Sudan has been a factor in the Sudanese civil war, with oil wealth sharing becoming a primary negotiating issue in the peace process. Oil has played a role in the extent of corruption and in sustaining military might in several African countries. And then I bolded to highlight this next passage, which reads, finally, threats to and security of the oil-producing areas in West Africa will be discussed, including US engagement to improve security. And then I wrote, this afterthought in the description of a petropolitics seminar is particularly relevant in light of the recent deaths of US service members in African countries. News of their death struck a chord of dismay in much of the American public, who were largely caught off guard at the news that the US was active in African nations. Reuters noted in October this year that US deaths in Niger highlighted military mission creep in the continent, writing, the deaths shine a light on Washington's increasingly aggressive special forces led counterterrorism strategy in Africa and its risk of casualties. The Washington Post described the incident as indicative of a shadow war. The influence of oil and concerns surrounding the security of the flow of oil in the decision-making process behind such missions are often less left out of such reports, but are nakedly and outright stated in the NSA documents. The concept of war for oil is not new, with legacy press outlets, including CNN, readily reporting the admission of military leaders that the Iraq War was based on securing oil interests. The NSA's admission that conflicts are entered into in order to benefit oil flow, in plain words, adds corroboration to such admissions, which were at one time dismissed as speculation. Another significant document in this author's collaboration with Decipher in the Decipher use stream was that the NSA, I should reword that, was that the NSA routinely outsourced network security, and that the NSA showed very little concern for defensive security measures to protect their data. And a lot of the content in this passage in the article is based on the explanation that Susie gave to me, because I learned a lot from her speaking about these various elements of network security that are totally lacking so far to date in the NSA documents that we and that Susie has analyzed. I wrote, concern for catastrophic security breaches is not shown in the hundreds of documents Dawson has analyzed thus far, dating up to late 2004. Dawson discussed the way in which improper data breaches by foreign states, terrorist organizations, or other entities should have been a major concern for the NSA. This notable lack of concern for security and potential security breaches was especially ominous, Dawson explained, given the increased number of people who were given access to sensitive material thanks to the NSA's use of corporate outsourcing. She said, transferring data across corporate networks, as they expand the pool of who can receive data, all of that has security implications. So they're opening more and more and more and more breach points, proprietary networks, and it's impossible to secure it if they are using corporate parties and having to go through their support channels. It's insane. Dawson stated that the NSA might have assumed that their systems were essentially bulletproof, adding, if Hewlett-Packard types are responsible for network security, God help the NSA. I really enjoyed Susie's explanation of this issue. Dawson added that even denial and deception documents did not address network-wide compromises, leaks, or breaches from another state. However, some documents illustrate preparation for disaster recovery in case of real-world disasters like hurricanes, tornadoes, and the like. It should be noted that disaster recovery is totally separate from network security, and that the presence of one variety of preparedness only serves to highlight the utter lack of regard for the other. And the only reference to such concern was mentioned in the discussion of the fact that if a breach occurred, Congress was to be notified. So their concern for security breaches was more in how to explain it to Congress than to actually prevent it. While the NSA appears to have largely ignored network security, multiple documents Dawson analyzed described offensive hacking tactics. In light of the numerous breaches of insecurity that have taken place over the years since these documents were penned, one hopes that a concern for data security has manifested since 2004. And then the conversation in that particular stream moved on to executive accessibility and the open door policy that we saw that was emphasized in a lot of different documents that we looked at, and the fact that executive accessibility sort of created a veneer of openness, but the reality was that people like Snowden who would raise serious objections were policed and silenced. Dawson remarked that many of the NSA documents emphasized executive accessibility, while simultaneously executives were shown to employ an amnesiac approach to their role. She used the example of Snowden's attempt to raise constitutional issues resulting from mass surveillance as an example of the type of dangerous self-policing groupthink that can occur in environments that extol the virtues of executive accessibility, but also punish those who bring up serious questions. Dawson said, the function of corporatism is to create a veneer of executive accessibility, but to discourage employees from asking hard questions. An additional Snowden interview titled Snowden file interview titled Interview with Jim Cusick, SID Assistant Deputy Director for Data Acquisition, provided insight into the mindset of the leaders operating within the NSA in concert with figures like Michael Hayden. Cusick states in the interview, I let it be known to NSA leadership that I was willing to take on virtually any task as long as it was in the middle of the fray, it was challenging, and it made a difference. Being a senior operations officer in NSOC has to rank as the best job in SIGINT by orders of magnitude. Heading up unconventional operations and managing the NSA's largest budget category was the hardest and most demanding job I ever took on. Representing Lieutenant General Hayden at the Pentagon during the aftermath of 9/11 and Operation Iraqi Freedom was fascinating and added a whole new perspective on support to the warfighter and national tactical integration. So I looked up Cusick, and there's actually very little on him, surprising or unsurprising. There were zero news articles referencing him, but there was additional documentation regarding Cusick's role at the NSA, which revealed that James M. Cusick, Assistant Deputy Director of the NSA Data Acquisition, they called him Mr. Data Acquisition. He's the specialist in charge of building collection systems that can acquire vast amounts of data. And his unit is the one that is running this program. To the best of my knowledge, and they were quoting a intelligence source on this, and I believe he had a name. I forget the name right now, but if you click the link, it'll show you. To the best of my knowledge, in the 5 years in which the program has been running, it has not caught a single person. So that Cusick described his values in NSA documents as, quote, willing to participate in virtually anything so long as the task was in the middle of the fray, it was challenging and made a difference, is concerning given his participation in the illegal mass surveillance of American citizens that has reportedly not delivered enough actionable intelligence to deliver a single person, suggesting that mass surveillance is not intended to address terrorism and national security so much as it is to monitor and effectively control the public. Snowden's take on the illegality of mass surveillance practice, and I just linked his tweet relatively recently. He says, mass surveillance was never classified to save lives. It was classified because the government knew if a real court ruled on it, they would declare it unconstitutional. Since 2013, they have, again and again. And then he links a Reuters article on a German court ruling that against foreign intelligence and mass surveillance. And then I wrote that former technical director William Binney has been a longtime critic of the NSA's mass surveillance activities. His criticism of the practice is especially important because he helped create the program, but was horrified to later learn that the system he had developed was used against American citizens in a vast domestic spying program. Binney's resignation in protest of domestic mass surveillance came years before the publication of the Snowden files. The issue of domestic surveillance, as described in the Snowden documents, has been thoroughly publicized by various outlets. However, the ready willingness of individuals such as James Cusick, a major figure in the NSA's data acquisition program, to betray legal and ethical principles as openly stated in the unreported Snowden documents, creates a sharp contrast with the moral and constitutional stance shown by figures like Binney. And Susie commented during our stream that at one point that during our discussions that a little discussed factor in the current neo-McCarthyist hysteria and obsession with Russia may stem from the fact that the country took in Edward Snowden despite the US and Western nations' desire to apprehend him. Dawson said, if you're, quote, if you're on the shit list of the US empire, the Western mafia, Russia is one of the few countries that you can go to and still live and work. So far, all of this is a huge vendetta against Russia for providing safe refuge for whistleblowers. Pardon me. Snowden has often spoken of the double standard employed against dissidents who speak out against the wrongs of Western nations and allies in comparison with the large outpouring of support from Western NGOs and humanitarian groups in response to activists and whistleblowers originating in states opposed by the West and their allies. And this includes countries like Iran and Russia. A further issue that Dawson and this author noted during the analysis of the multiple unreported Snowden documents was the collaborative interaction between various intelligence agencies. This is significant because it works against the commonly held perception of Snowden as publishing NSA data due to an animosity between the agencies. And we've spoken about this in multiple streams. Dawson noted that the content of the Snowden files did not support such an interpretation. Instead, they revealed a revolving door between the agencies and the large extent to which the various agencies were interdependent, providing necessary services for each other. This is significant because it goes against the framing of Snowden's release of NSA documents as the culmination of a rivalry between the CIA and NSA. The agencies are so intertwined that they deploy employees and establish offices within other agencies to handle specific issues relating to their specialization. Much of the content revealed in Snowden's documents reveals information that would harm the overall interests of the CIA much more than the agency would benefit from the wounded reputation of the NSA. Overall, Dawson and this author concluded in our analysis of the documents that it is highly unlikely that the CIA had any part in Snowden's decision to leak NSA information. The CIA is also an important customer of the NSA. And this whole relationship of the NSA as a money-making sort of corporation in the way that it sees itself, and the NSA's discussion in its own documents of customers and intelligence products was a new revelation to me after beginning collaborating with Susie in Decipher use streams. I had no idea that that's the way they thought about their role. One of the numerous documents that discuss the interdependence between the NSA and CIA was the file from Batch 4 titled CIA's Directorates, Understanding More About Them. The document describes the collaboration between the CIA's Directorate of Intelligence, which is abbreviated to DI, and the NSA's Signals Intelligence, SIGINT. The file reads, although there is certainly collaboration between CIA, DI's, and analytic community and the NSA's SIGINT analysts, the CIA is mostly a SIGINT customer, using finished NSA product as one of the most valuable sources in producing all-source intelligence products. That the CIA is an important customer for the NSA further suggests that the CIA would be unlikely to damage the NSA through the release of documents like those leaked by Edward Snowden, and adds to the conclusion that Snowden is indeed an unbiased whistleblower. And so I wanted to address that. I was tempted to write an entire article on that subject, but I thought that I should at least include it in a summary of our findings. The same document goes on to describe the interdependence of the CIA and NSA regarding the CIA's Directorate of Operations and the NSA's Signals Intelligence Directorate. The file reads, there are many examples of DO and SID partnerships with HUMINT and SIGINT enabling each other. The file goes on to describe the various directorates of the NSA and CIA and their customer-supplier relationship, as well as their interdependence and joint efforts. It reads, some joint CIA-NSA efforts, which actually include people from across the CIA directorates and SID organizations, offer the best examples of how these two agencies can work well together. The Special Collection Service, SCS, is a joint NSA-CIA organization whose mission is the covert collection of SIGINT from official U.S. establishments abroad. The clandestine SIGINT program, ClanSig, run by the Jointly Staffed Technology Management Office, TMO, at the CIA, provides numerous examples of HUMINT enabling SIGINT and vice versa. Susie Dawson compared the relationship between these agencies as to the concept of the left hand and the right hand of the same body. And I think that the documents absolutely show that over and over again. And this is just a couple of examples of that type of relationship. Further documents illustrated the revolving door between the NSA and CIA, as well as the corporate sector. A file titled Perspectives from a Summer Intern stated, he worked at a wide variety of stops in this public sector, including a tour as the deputy director at the CIA, and later served in executive positions for private sector companies. And when the Huffington Post spoke with William Binney, he had stated his belief that the NSA's dragnet surveillance practices were used by the FBI for the express purpose of protecting big banking interests. This statement is particularly relevant in the discussion of an NSA document that shows meddling in foreign banking institutions. Although The Intercept reported on this particular file, the outlet's coverage of the information amounted to one paragraph and failed to discuss key questions raised by the agency's self-professed interference in foreign banks. The document in question, titled Crash Team, states, one key to the crash team's success has been its access to North Korean financial transaction data routed through foreign banks, a lucrative source for intelligence production and SIGINT development, SIGDEV, efforts. The document continues, in order to curtail North Korea's banking presence in Europe, targeted financial institutions as collection targets in their own right. This revealed several instances of their complicity in North Korea's efforts to avoid scrutiny of its activities. And then I spoke about this file, and I said that signal intelligence would directly target European banking institutions is a revelation that deserves coverage in its own right, and proved a major topic of discussion during Decipher analysis with Susie Dawson, who said, this shows that even big banksters can be targeted if it's politically expedient for them to be. As Dawson and I discussed, the crash team file raises serious questions about the NSA's power over banks and financial institutions, both domestically and internationally. Dawson described the significant questions raised by the revelation that the NSA had interfered with foreign banks. The NSA spying on the commercial sector is probably much more rampant than we typically hear about. The next question is, what are they doing with that information? The power of that information is unbelievable. They are collecting the strategic planning documents of those entities, knowing what they are going to do ahead of time. The capacity to act on that ahead of time is phenomenal. It is the power not just to respond punitively to what has happened, or to what is happening, but to respond to what will happen, alter that future, and prevent it from happening. An additional document discussed during the Decipher live streams listed a number of entities and institutions who are customers of the NSA's intelligence product. The file, titled The Washington Liaison Office, who are those guys, lists the Federal Reserve banking system as a customer of the NSA, among other entities. And I just included a screenshot of the bullet point list. The document also states, and I'll just read out the name of these entities that are customers of the NSA. It includes the Department of Agriculture, the Department of Health and Human Services, the Department of the Interior, the Department of Transportation, the Environmental Protection Agency, or the EPA, the Export-Import Bank, the Federal Aviation Administration, the Federal Communications Commission, the Federal Reserve System, and the National Aeronautics and Space Administration. The document also states, the Washington Liaison Office customers usually have competing priorities totally unknown to each other, requiring a delicate balancing act in providing timely SIGINT to all. For example, what the Secretary of Agriculture needs for her afternoon meeting with EU representatives is completely different from what the NSA administrator needs prior to his visit to India. Again, serious questions arise from the fact that the Federal Reserve Bank is not a government entity, yet is able to buy intelligence services from the NSA. This raises the obvious concern as to what varieties of services the Federal Reserve Bank buys from the NSA and for what purpose this intelligence is used. The document's description of its customers' quote, competing priorities implies an incredibly delicate and potentially disastrous amount of power held by the NSA. From the agency's track record in terms of both legality and ethics, this document raises serious concern. An additional file titled Conference on GSM Collection in Iraq, which has not been previously discussed by media outlets, indicated that as far back as 2004, simply being in a targeted geographical location was enough to cause the NSA to surveil handsets. The file iterates that a profile was created to include only the calls that were made near 27 known heroin processing labs in the country. When run against available metadata, the program produced a list of the handsets that were used in the targeted area. The top 20 handsets were then tasked for collection, and at least one has produced reportable intelligence. This is significant because it shows that of the 20 surveilled handsets, the majority produced no actionable data. Dawson pointed out that the issue of collecting data on random people physically present at domestically targeted events, including protests, could be comparable to the geographically determined spying shown in the document. Dawson discussed that in such examples, even those who were not protesting but happened to be in the physical vicinity of the protest, such as shopkeepers, passers-by, etc., would be targeted in such an instance, illustrating the pervasiveness of intrusive mass surveillance. The NSA, This is a mistake I'll have to fix. I included a heading that I didn't intend to. But the NSA file titled Big Changes at the US Mission to the United Nations, USUN, proved exceptionally noteworthy. It provided key insight into the NSA's role at the UN and the agency's self-concept regarding its influence in the lead up to the Iraq War. The file also illustrated the influence of the United States in crafting narratives that would drive decision-making at the UN. While Dawson and this author read the document, we were prompted to research a number of secondary sources, including George W. Bush's speech to the UN in 2002. The NSA admits that the agency participated in crafting Bush's speech for the purpose of garnering support for the war in Iraq, as well as using as many UN resources as possible for the conflict. I should have reworded that. Apologies. In light of the weapons of mass destruction argument Bush employed during the UN speech, crafted in part by the NSA, Dawson raised the issue of the suspicious death of Weapons Director Inspector Dr. David Kelly. The BBC reported on Kelly's death, stating that he had been outed as a possible source of a report that cast doubt on the government's claim that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction capable of being deployed within 45 minutes. The BBC wrote that soon after the controversy erupted, Kelly was found dead in a woodland a few miles from his Oxfordshire home after apparently taking his own life. The US and the NSA described the desire to use UN infrastructure for the US agenda. The document brags about the NSA's success in crafting global narrative regarding the war in Iraq and the UN's support for the conflict. The document also describes our very own NSA representative to the USUN, and the name is redacted, had announced not only the August 2004 end of his 3-year assignment, but also his retirement from federal service in early September. Yeah, and Susie and I discussed the fact that the NSA has a representative of the agency which interfaces directly with the USUN is troubling. And personally, I was totally unaware prior to that particular stream that the NSA, that the intelligence agencies had a direct interface with the UN in this way. That was new to me. Dawson described the report as the NSA's implicit admission that it controls the UN. She also noted that the weapons of mass destruction argument for the war, according to the NSA document, originated with SIGINT intelligence provided by the NSA. Effectively, the NSA is taking credit in the file for the WMD narrative that helped initiate the US's involvement in one of the longest, most devastating, and costliest wars in history. By 2013, Reuters reported that the war in Iraq had cost over $2 trillion. The Huffington Post reports that over 500,000 Iraqi civilians had died during the conflict to date. And that, I believe that was a couple of years ago as well. It may have been 2016. I would have to check. That the NSA would claim responsibility for the narrative that led to one of the most costly conflicts in history makes it truly one of the most destructive forces the planet has ever seen. Dawson commented that the NSA's admission suggested the agency has taken part in constructing narratives and aiding in the creation of UN resolutions for decades. And this is confirmed because the document reads, as the US mounted a strategic response to these attacks, which is in reference to 9/11, and worked with the UN to garner world support for the global war on terrorism, SIGINT proved vital in the US negotiations that resulted in 2 key and unanimously approved Security Council resolutions on Iraq. SIGINT also contributed to the composition of the US President's speech at the UN General Assembly in September of 2002, and to Secretary Powell's presentation to the Security Council on the case against the Iraq dictator, among other events. SIGINT also helped USUN and state officials in their decisions regarding Afghanistan, countless peacekeeping operations around the world, Africa, Sudan, and so many other situations. And this document and that passage in the document is critical in that it shows the NSA outright stating that its signals intelligence influenced US negotiations that resulted in 2 key and unanimously approved Security Council resolutions on Iraq. Essentially, the NSA is taking responsibility for helping plunge the world into the most one of the most protracted, costly, and devastating conflicts in history. And then I have a picture of Powell in his famous presentation to the UN, where he modeled a vial of anthrax while giving a presentation in 2003, which is now reviled as a complete failed and empty narrative that was pushed in order to get us into war. And as I discussed previously in the article, in order to military leaders have admitted that the Iraq War was entered to a large extent in order to protect oil interests. And so it was surprising to me that the NSA had this degree of involvement in the narrative that led to the war in Iraq, because I was more under the impression that the CIA had led to that type of groupthink, which then influenced legacy press outlets. So this was new to me. The file emphasizes the point when it states, SIGINT also contributed to the composition of the US President's speech at the UN General Assembly 2002 and to Secretary Powell's presentation to the Security Council on the case against Iraq dictator, among other events. And I repeated that quote again because I felt that these passages were absolutely mind-blowing in their blatant portrayal of the NSA as responsible for these events. The passage indicates that the NSA's signals intelligence contributed to the now infamous presentation to the UN given by former Secretary of State Colin Powell, who called that speech, in retrospect, a great intelligence failure, according to PBS. Crucially, the document also states that the NSA's signals intelligence, quote, helped the US, UN, state officials in their decisions regarding Afghanistan, countless peacekeeping operations around the world, Africa, Sudan, and so many other situations. And again, I repeated that for a reason, and that is that these statements are insane. They are amazing. This critical statement indicates that the NSA was not only responsible for providing faulty intelligence that led to the Iraq War, but that it has also contributed directly to foreign policy decisions made by both the United Nations and the United States. And I say that because in the passage it states that that US, UN, and state officials were influenced. So this is the United States and the UN being influenced by the NSA. The statement amounts to an admission that the NSA has been a driving force in the American foreign policy and the United Nations decision-making process for years, if not decades. And Susie had mentioned this and spoken about this in the sense that this is not just an admission in regards to Iraq. It is a statement of responsibility for policy decisions going back years and decades. And so that is of huge concern. And that's one of the reasons that I wanted to finish on this point in the article, because it is, I think, one of the, Susie has stated this as well, it's one of the most significant things that we've seen coming out of the Snowden files that was not intensely reported on by legacy media outlets. And then I just concluded with a brief statement saying that this is an important story and distributed media will continue to provide coverage regarding the results of Decipher U collaborative analysis as it unfolds. I had almost hit 4,000 words and I didn't want to drag it on too far with an entire sum up concluding paragraph. So I see a few things that I need to fix in the next few hours in this article, some repetitions and some sentences that need to be reworded, but that's my sum up of the first half-ish of batch 4 of the Snowden files from The Intercept. I really didn't even get that far into the streams that we've done just on this batch. It was just so much information that I had to cut it off relatively early. And I'm hoping to get the next article out on this batch in the next week or so. I hope maybe by next Friday I'll have something else written. But I'm really grateful for collaborating with Susie in this process because I am learning so much that I had no clue about. As an independent journalist, you feel like maybe you know a little bit about a topic, but it's just opened my eyes to how much I don't know. And I think that that's a good thing because it makes me want to go research these primary documents more. And I hope that that's the same experience that viewers are having, is that they're encouraged to go read primary documents for themselves. I've heard from a few people that they have been inspired to do that. So that's wonderful. And I hope that that continues. And Susie, I don't know what your status is or if you're around in the background, but if you have any comments, I'd love to hear them. But your audio is a bit in and out.
Okay, if you want to just give me 3 minutes,
I can't really make out what you're saying.
Is that any better?
Try again.
Okay, give me 3 minutes. I'm gonna
Okay.
relocate and then I'll jump on cam and I'll give you all my feedback.
Okay, great. Thank you. That would be wonderful. I'm going to stop share real quick and just check chat. And I haven't actually opened the YouTube stream, so give me 1 minute while I do that. Okay. So yeah, if any of you have compliments, or I'm not compliments, God, I just saw the chat. But if you have any questions or comments on the article and anything that I missed, anything that you thought should be added or anything like that, I'd love to hear it. So thank you. I really appreciate all your comments so far that I'm reading through. And I'm not sure why somebody brought up the executive order from Trump. But thank you so much, everyone. You're wonderful. And thank you for tuning in and listening to that long description of that file. But I think it, as Susie said, it's really good to have a sum up of what we've done in the last few weeks, because there's so much that, and I know that when we're doing a live stream, there are gaps, and we have to go grab something, or we just have a monologue or a bit of a rant on various topics at times. So when the information and the discussion of the information is broken up like that, it can seem like maybe not as much is being discussed and found as there actually is. And what's amazing, like absolutely amazing to me, is to read back and to re-listen to our streams, and then to look up what are the various articles that we're looking at, the individuals like Cusick who are in these documents, and to see that these individuals have zero news reports written about them. They have zero coverage, or the documents like the handsets and the geographical targeting and spying, that document had zero coverage. So I think what we're doing is really worthwhile. I think it's really important information that we're finding. And I think, as I said before, learning from Susie has been an amazing, enlightening process. And I think that is at least personally helpful. And I hope that it's also beneficial to viewers. So I'm going to take a break 1 second and just tweet out that we're live and whatnot. Yeah, and actually, and in the process of writing that article, a lot of it was simply looking at the document we had looked at, and then listening to what Susie had to say to explain it, and then also researching if there was any news coverage of it. And much of the time, what Susie had to say absolutely opened my eyes to the context and to the background of these issues. For example, network security, which I had no idea, I have no concept of that until Susie explained it. I'm just taking a second to tweet out that we're live. Oh, Susie, are you there? I can see you.
It looked like death warmed up, seriously.
No, she looked fine.
Hold on.
Got a lot going on. And I'm just going to wait a moment for Susie to come back. And like I said, I'm just trying to tweet out the link and that we're here. 1 second. I always feel so awkward tweeting while I know I'm being filmed. And I think it's really great that Susie asked me to read my article because, you know, the article, the finished product that you come out with, whether it's Susie's article, my article, or whether it's the clips that Fly makes where they go through the findings and they highlight the important elements of what we've spoken about, those are the finished products that are as much a part of collaborative, as much a part of the journalism process as any other, obviously, and they're the product that people interface with usually. But I think it's really helpful to have that as an element of what we look at here, as well as the research process. I think it would be pretty boring to have the drafting process also be shown, but I think to have that beginning, middle, and end sort of present on this stream is really great, and it's something that, you know, I think it was Esoteric Ed put it really, really well when he said it was, you know, journalism live, and that, you know, you're really seeing the process that we go through as independent journalists when we write and when we research. So. Always takes longer to tweet than I realize it does. And so I believe, if I remember correctly, we were on about 139, I believe was the document that we were at with the Snowden files. So if Susie's going to be away from the computer for a few minutes, I will just dive right into those files and begin analyzing them. And whenever Susie's ready to come back, then we'll just hear what she has to say. So I'm going to share screen again in one moment, unless Susie's here.
Sorry, my timing's bad because I'm back.
No, you're right.
Okay, first of all, my apologies for not appearing to be here tonight. I actually was here, but I've just spent the last 3 or 4 hours helping a little person to puke over and over again. So
no, I totally understand.
Okay, Elizabeth, your article is incredible. Your article is amazing. It's amazing for a number of reasons to me. First of all, it's really well written.
Thank you.
I love your writing. Your writing is really, really top notch. And I read a lot. I read pretty much all day, every day. So I truly mean it when I say that. Second of all,
that's a huge compliment. That means a lot to me. Thank you.
Second of all, it's really classy writing. Second of all, it has shown me that, like, what I'd done previously with my Decipher reporting, my written reporting, was basically like just picking out these little interesting morsels, and it was almost like 10 things you didn't know about the NSA, like kind of style writing, right? Like it didn't actually number them, but I don't think there's more than probably about 100 words, you know, max about each point. And also, so you've fleshed it out, you've made it a proper article rather than just a list of like findings, which is basically what I've been doing with Decipher to date. So I think your contribution is evolving the reporting and raising the standard, raising the bar on the standard of reporting of these findings. But also you're going and getting all of the public references and the public sources. And so you're taking the finding that we've made and explaining it, then you're adding in my deciphering of the technical information into regular speak, but then you're going and cross-referencing that information against what's in the public domain. And then that's just giving it a total another layer of credibility because you're evidencing the points. So you're evidencing them with the documents, you're evidencing them with whatever level of expertise I could be ascribed with, but then you are backing them up with additional public sources. And that is completely next level. That is really, really next level. So
Thank you. I really
think it's really well done. I think it's really well done. I think probably my only criticism would be that, and this is the same thing with me when I read through my own work, because you know your own work, because you wrote it yourself, you tend to move through it quite quickly. But I think people who are seeing the article for the first time, including me actually, I tend to read through a lot more slowly because I need to let each point really sink in.
Yeah, that makes
so
sense.
at times then I was actually tempted to come in after you and read through the article again. But to read through it at my pace as someone who hasn't read it before, who doesn't know what's coming in the next sentence.
Absolutely.
But then also as authors and as journalists, we're not used to having to read our work on live stream, so it's not.
Well, the other part of that is that I was literally trying to get this published before our stream, so I'm rereading the information that I had just written, and so that adds to that sense of familiarity. If I had given it a day between, then it probably wouldn't have been so, kind of fast-paced in the way that I read it. But life is as life is. Sometimes you can't really help it. So
I think you've done an amazing job.
Thank you so much.
Amazing job. And then my thoughts about Decipher as a whole. I've been getting a lot of feedback from people about it, a lot of feedback. And people are just like, this is another world first. This is something that's never been done before. I say another because pretty much like Internet Party has just been hammering out these we're like first to hold our meetings online and first to release our strategy documents in the middle of a political campaign and first to have like a leader live streaming in from the other side of the planet during an election and so on and so forth. It's been like a year of firsts, right? But Decipher You is first serious analytical journalism of source documents live online. And like I explained in a previous week, that was almost accidental.
It was amazing the way that fell together.
But it is definitely significant. Definitely. So, I can't make some of the grand statements that I've heard yet from others who very enthusiastically tell me this changes everything. I'm not sure this changes everything, but I am sure that it's changing the way that some people are looking at the Snowden disclosures and the Snowden documents. Because people had assumed that the big shebang stuff had already come.
Exactly. Yes.
The big stories were in the past rather than in the future, in the present. I would sum this up by saying that these documents have changed the way that I see the entire world.
Yeah.
That's not an understatement. They have changed the way that I see the entire world, the way that the world functions, the way that the intelligence agencies interface with everything, commerce, industry, society. I felt last week like it sounded like, no one said this to me, but this is my personal feelings. I felt last week I was accidentally diminishing the privacy aspect. And, there are some, I've said pretty consistently throughout the last few years that there are some things about my situation and what I did that are not in the public arena and that go a ways to explaining how voraciously I was targeted. But I've chosen to, for my own reasons, keep that out of the public arena. The day may come where that is not the case and where that it becomes very well known. And then people will understand to what degree I mean the words that I'm about to say. I really care about privacy. Privacy meant the world to me. Privacy was something that needed to be saved. And privacy was, what they were doing was eradicating privacy. And that was apparent to me many years ago. But I feel like the things that we have learned in these sessions about the UN, about war, and the process by which wars are given the stamp, the seal of approval, the process by which they are given that. I feel like these things are like even a bigger deal, because this isn't just the violation of the privacy of people in the West. This is the cost of the lives of people who aren't in the West, and some of whom are. And that has completely, it's completely in some ways spun the entire way that I see the last 6 years of my life, because I feel like the things we're now discussing and studying are even more important than what was at stake previously.
And they at least give context to those things, you know, like, and for this to be that revolutionary for you, when you've already, you were previously aware of a lot of these issues and you've been studying in this area for a long time, I think speaks to how important these findings are as well.
I've been studying the way that Western targets have been targeted by the intelligence agencies. Yeah. I didn't understand the full extent of the activities, the other activities of the intelligence agencies. So I'd been studying the persecution of Kim.com. I'd been studying the persecution of Occupy activists, of WikiLeaks activists. I'd been studying the methods of oppression meted out to us. I had begun to study the interrelationships between the members of the Five Eyes. Like I said last week, I was talking about how the sphere widens. It's gotten wider and wider and wider, till we're at the point now where I'm understanding that these agencies have influence. In their own documents, they use the word influence. Yeah, they have influence over every facet of human existence, from finance and banking to international affairs, diplomacy and relations, to the war and the military, and to literally people living or dying, to education, like we see now in the pervasive surveillance of even children through Google Classroom and things like this, to the future of technology itself, the development, the architecture, to the strategic, this stuff about the essay competition and the strategic planning for 2020 back in 2004, they are literally shaping the future of human existence for every person on this planet. This is what I mean when I say now I'm seeing this as more than privacy. When it was just being targeted, privacy was a really big deal. But when I understand now that these agencies are meddling in the entire future of the planet 20 years ahead of time, that's where I have begun to understand it's about more than just privacy. So yes, the privacy violations are egregious. They had no right to ever be doing that to us. They have no right to be targeting civilians, as I discussed last week. They have no right to be using military infrastructure, military facilities, capabilities, technologies, resources against civilians. That is egregious. But the fact that they've subverted the UN, that they've subverted nearly the entire international community, that they are essentially blackmailing, or what's a better word, like where we discussed how they entice countries to give their own citizens data in exchange for the data of the other countries, etc. It's like not blackmail. I need a different word than blackmail.
Quid pro quo, or
no, it's like enticing, but it's more than enticing. I don't know, the word is escaping me at the moment, but this basically it just comes down to the fact that where before I considered myself a privacy activist or a transparency activist, now I'm starting to think like I'm not even sure there's a term for it. Like I want to emancipate the entire human race from the meddling of these agencies who think that they have the right to human evolution, to human society decades in advance. They don't have that right. Absolutely. We talk about self-determination of peoples. We need self-determination of the human race, because we don't have it so long as those agencies are pulling the strings. So long as they're designing our future, a generation ahead. then we completely lack self-determination.
Yeah, and I think ultimately that is the fight, whether you're Lee Camp, Caitlin Johnstone, you, me, or for all these independent journalists. I think that's the point, the ultimate point that it comes down to, is that this isn't a fight for the whole of humanity, and Caitlin writes about that a lot. But I think that it's both. So there's the role of the independent media, the independent anti-establishment journalism across the board to fight that fight, and then there's also the revelation for individual people that realize, I have to do this myself. I can't rely on CNN to tell me what's going on. I have to look at these documents myself. And so individually, person by person, that's the fight that has to happen. But
I agree. Everyone has to contribute in the best way that they can. And, for some people, that's not studying documents or creating media. For some people, that's leaving a coat at that Dallas, Texas clothing store that just is letting homeless people take coats off the sidewalk if they need them to keep warm. Everybody gives in their own way. But I agree that we need to, it's not just that we need to teach people not to Google search. We need to teach them that there is education available outside of the bought and paid for corporate universities and charter high schools, that there is media and information available outside of CNN and BBC, that there is science and technology that is available outside of the major industrial R&D departments. There are people like Haven is like a classic example, like Snowden's app, the Guardian project.
Exactly. Yeah, I was reading about that a little bit.
We now have technologists, that the apps like that, it wasn't so long ago, would have had to come out of Apple, would have had to come out of some other complicit corporation. And it would have been marketed as a surveillance tool, not as a surveillance self-defense tool, which is what Haven is. It's a surveillance self-defense tool. So we are slowly building the new world, the replacement. We're slowly building the replacement media. Now we're even building replacement applications. We have like some hope for the future in technology, some hope for the future in media. But this has changed. This series has absolutely changed the way that I view what the intelligence agencies do and the scale that they do it on.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree.
And to that end, I think it's probably arguably been my most important work, though I think everything I did prior probably led to this point.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think anything in terms of the whole, I don't think anything is more important than the other overall. And I think that is a great note to dive into some more documents on. So I'm going to go get started on document 139, and we will see where it leads us. Maybe it'll be nothing. Maybe it'll be something interesting. I'll start sharing screen in a moment.